Hello, and welcome to None of the Above. My name is Steve Nimirovsky, and I'm your host. On None of the Above, we examine why the political system is dysfunctional and polarized, and we try and offer up solutions. And I don't think you can have a conversation today about dysfunction and polarization without talking about the news. Obviously, the phrase fake news is pervasive. Everybody has their idea of what fake news means. And I've talked on this show before about the fact that you have got to get educated from all perspectives. I know I've mentioned before that most of my day, when I want to read the paper, I'm on the Wall Street Journal and then I'm on the New York Times, or I'm on The Economist. And I'm always looking for places that either are balanced or are giving a fresh perspective. And I've often suggested to you, the readers, that you need to find a couple places to go to, and you've got to get outside your box. You cannot rely on the same news source you've been relying on forever, whether it's print media, video, whatever it is. You've got to find other channels because you've got to get other perspectives. If you don't get other perspectives, you're locked into this world of polarization that I abhor and we've got to get out of. So it's very important to get educated. Today we're going to talk to Anafi Wahed, and she is the founder of a really exciting website, called the Flipside. And you can find it at flipside.io. And Anafi wanted me to specifically emphasize the .io part so people can find her. And I know what she's talking about because most of my websites are .us. Everybody wants to go to .com or .net first of all, but in this case we're talking about .io. And I learned about this young woman and her really interesting enterprise recently, and I've been following it for months. I'm a subscriber. Every morning I wake up and here's an email from the flip side. And what they've done is find a way to balance the news. So they'll pick topics. Each day I think there's at least 2 topics. And they give you both sides, the right and the left, liberal, conservative, whatever you want to call it. They balance the news for you. So in this way you can go to one source and get a balance. For those of you who may recall, a few years ago we did an interview with All Sides. All Sides is another similar outlet that you can go to and get a balanced presentation of the news of the day. So this is what I want you to do. If you don't want to read multiple newspapers, I have now found the answer for you. And the answer is the flip side, and the answer is Anafi Wahed. So Anafi, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me, Stephen. It's a pleasure to be here.
So you wake up one day and you invent the flip side. How does this happen?
Yes, great question. So my background is actually not in media or politics or journalism. I'm a financial analyst by trade. I'm a CFA. And in 2016, it was summer, and I was looking at what's happening in our country, the Trump versus Hillary election, and I realized I needed to do something. I did not want to wake up November 9th and realized I could have done something more. So I quit my job at Ernst & Young. I went to work for the Hillary campaign up in New Hampshire, and that's where I really came face to face with what we have now all realized, which is that the media bias and the echo chambers and how harmful they are. And so after the election, I spent a couple months, not going to lie, being very depressed about the outcome of the 2016 election, as you can imagine. But then instead of joining the resistance, I decided to take a longer term approach and actually address one of the many roots of the problem, which is media bias. And so I started the Flip Side in February 2017 with the hope of bringing myself and my friends in New York City out of the media bubble to give them a balanced viewpoint from both liberal and conservative perspectives.
So you mentioned you were working on the Clinton campaign. Mm-hmm. What were you seeing on the campaign at the time? Because that was obviously part of your work. What were you seeing that was causing you concern about balanced reporting of news?
I think when you're working for the campaign, you are so busy day to day that you don't really have time to follow all of the news and all of the op-eds. And so we were receiving talking points from the DNC, from the New Hampshire Democratic Party, and I was still following just CNN and the New York Times. And so what I was getting was a very different picture of what was happening on the ground. So when I would knock on the doors of conservatives and moderates and independents in New Hampshire, they were telling me about things. They were telling me about the real day-to-day lives that I was not informed about living in my echo chamber in New York City, having worked in finance and making 6 figures in a previous life. A specific story I always recall is it was late October. I knocked on the door of a woman who was a registered Democrat. And I knocked on her door expecting to just tell her, to make sure she's going to go to the polls on November 8th. And she saw my Stronger Together t-shirt and she says, don't waste your time. I'm voting for Gary Johnson. And so, of course, I launch into my usual spiel about how this is an important election. We want to make sure Hillary Clinton gets to the presidency. You know, voting for Gary Johnson is a wasted vote, et cetera, et cetera. So this is an elderly woman. She is disabled. She came to the door with a walker. Her home is very modest. It's a one-story house in the middle of rural New Hampshire. And she says, I get $400 a month from Social Security, and it's not enough to pay the property taxes on my home. They're foreclosing on my home in next month. If you tell me right now Hillary Clinton has a plan to save my home, I will go vote for her. That to me was a real wake-up call of how separate our worlds are. My world in New York City, reading about the stock market, hearing President Obama speak about how everybody has access to healthcare and everything is great, versus the real suffering of Americans all across the states.
So that's interesting. You heard my introduction, obviously, to this segment, and I think far too many people do get into their news silo. So you
Absolutely.
said your news silo had been maybe the New York Times or CNN or wherever you're getting your news, or maybe the late night comedy shows, wherever you're getting it.
Yes,
but
that
now you're going door to door and you're talking to people who maybe aren't sharing your views or have different problems, and it's a wake-up call. That's fascinating to me, because quite frankly, I find most people in your same situation either would have ignored the woman at the door, or would have more or less come back and dug in even harder and basically said, we're not doing a good enough job here of how we're messaging to this woman. They would not have awakened to the notion that maybe there are other messages out there.
Absolutely, and I think some of it is messaging, right? The Democrats, and I have said this many a time, do not do a good job of advocating for their message, advocating for their policies. At the same time, it is true that there is a media bias. Data shows that over 90% of the journalists who donated to political campaigns in the 2016 election donated to Hillary Clinton. The IG report that recently came out shows pervasive bias at the FBI. Now, do I think those are tantamount to what President Trump is saying about those institutions? Absolutely not. I will defend free press. I will defend the FBI that I think is doing their best. At the same time, there are kernels of truth in what President Trump and the Republicans have been saying for years.
So you have this aha moment. You probably didn't quit the campaign, but the election's over, and now you've decided, I have to do something. So how do you go about doing this? I mean, what you've taken on is a pretty big task.
Yes, absolutely. And in the beginning, I was doing it very badly. In the beginning, it was me and my best friend. Both of us worked on the Hillary campaign, reading our usual liberal outlets and also reading the conservative outlets and saying, this is what we think both sides are saying. Thankfully, we have very good friends who said, wow, your conservative side is not doing the conservative side justice. Because we are still coming to the conservative news outlets with our liberal biases. And that's the whole problem. The problem is the newsrooms across the states are largely filled with liberals. And I was a psychology major, so I understand that there's confirmation biases and there are all of these other psychological mechanisms at play. And so I think the turning point for me was realizing that I really needed a diverse team. And so now I have a co-editor who is a staunch conservative, who was a volunteer for the Romney campaign. We have a diverse group of contributors, everyone from Bernie bros to libertarians to very, very avid Trump supporters. And that's how we're able to do what we do well, which is we have every single article read and approved by both a liberal and a conservative person on my team.
All right, so I want to get to that eventually, but I still want to start back at the beginning with you, because you've identified a problem, you want to have a balanced approach. What were some of the possible solution sets that you examined in terms of how to solve this problem?
Sure. I think there were many solutions to the problem, right? For example, I always tell my friends, okay, on the one hand, social media is making our echo chambers worse, right? We tend to like and follow the people we like. And so half the country is only following Ezra Klein and the other half is only following Ben Shapiro. So what if we use social media to actually break out of our echo chambers? What if we followed Fox News? What if we followed the National Review and the American Conservative? You mentioned allsides.com. That's also a solution where you can see headlines from across the political spectrum. What I thought about was the fact that my friends are really busy, right? We have our professional lives, we have our personal lives, and then we just want to sit home and watch Netflix and not think about politics. And so for the average person who doesn't have the time or the desire to read 20 op-eds, how can we make breaking out of the echo chamber as painless as possible? And so we strive very hard at the Flipside to actually provide nuance in a 5-minute digest each morning. That's, I think, our specific value add.
All right, so that's what you decided. You're going to have no more than a 5-minute digest. As I said, I wake up, there it is every morning. What time do you hit the send button in the morning, by the way?
Oh, we schedule it the night before, so it's usually 3 or 4 a.m.
All right. I have a very bizarre sleeping pattern. Well, I'll sleep about 5 or 6 hours, and I wake up, and then I work, but then I go back to sleep. Everybody knows my sleeping patterns. So I'm seeing it come through maybe 4 or 5 in the morning here out in Colorado. So it must be showing up at 5, 6 in the morning in New York or wherever. Okay, so you decide to do this, and you decide to have this 5-minute format, but and I think it's fascinating. And what you do, for those, again, I think we're going to try and put something up on the screen and post it if we can, but you have a picture of your Flipside bear.
I do. Let me see if I can screen share.
All right, we'll screen share this Flipside bear. But then each day there are 2 topics. And what you do is you discuss the topic, and then you present the left or the liberal side and the right or the conservative side. So first of all, how do you choose your topics?
That's a great question. We actually scour the news outlets and see what the media outlets are already talking about, because we want a plethora of op-eds and analyses to choose from. We want to make sure that we have a lot of op-eds to work with. So we will typically choose the trending topics, that are front and center in the news today. So, okay, let's see.
So you're looking for topics that are very hot and timely, so to speak, of the day. Or maybe even were just very newsworthy the day before. All right. Exactly. And then, as you said, you're working on it the day before, so you're scouring papers nationwide and looking for articles and op-ed commentary from people. Okay. Now, we do live in this world where people are accused of fake news and whatever they call it. I call it skewed news. So how many different sources will you review on each side of the ledger?
Sure. That depends day to day. We do have an internal list of sources on the left, on the right, that we check every day. In addition, we also have other sources such as allsides.com and RSS feeds and Feedly and NewsWhip, where we're looking at both what journalists themselves are sharing, because often journalists will share their own work and other people's work that they find interesting, and also what people are sharing on social media. So we are doing our own checks of the news outlets and also checking what's being shared on Twitter, on Facebook, and then really reading all of the op-eds. We have 3 or 4 people working on every digest. And we make sure that these are the op-eds that we think are interesting, that are presenting logical viewpoints, and we select quotes from all of the articles. And so then if our readers want to go ahead and read more, they can click on the articles and read the full article. And on the data analytics side, we're seeing positive results, which is that our liberal readers are clicking on the conservative articles and vice versa. So our readers are, in fact, reading the Flipside. Anecdotally, my liberal friends tell me they love the National Review. My conservative friends say they really like The Atlantic from time to time. So this is all very encouraging, right? How can we help people break out of their echo chambers from their media bubbles for even 2 minutes, 5 minutes a day?
Oh, I think that's really good that your analytics are telling you that you're getting that kind of crossover.
Absolutely.
Now, right now, are you limited solely to print media?
At the moment, yes. Sometimes we will quote someone in a video, in which case we'll link to the video.
Do you have thoughts about having video opportunities here too, or do you think you're going to stick with the print media?
Right now, there are enough op-eds in print to keep us plenty busy. As our team continues to grow, as we raise funding, that's definitely something we're thinking about, one step at a time.
Now, we're in a political campaign time right now. We're in the midterms. The commercials are pervasive, and everybody's making their viewpoints there. And I know a lot of people are concerned about these political ads and whether they're true or not and everything. Have you thought about doing a feature on a political ad, where you take a political ad and you more or less break out both sides of what that particular argument is somehow, so that people have a connection to the election? That
is something we think about. However, a lot of the midterm elections are focused on specific states, and because our readers are spread across the nation, we don't know if that will go over well. For example, if we're focused on where I am in New York versus, focused on issues in California. Now, granted, some states are more important than others in terms of flipping the House, flipping the Senate. That's something we're thinking about. This is the first midterm elections that we've been around, the first big midterm elections, and so we want to make sure that whatever we do well. And so right now we have a proven formula for looking at trending topics and reading op-eds and doing that really well. So we don't want to, steer into new areas that maybe we will not perform so well in.
And by the way, I think what you just said is critical, that you have to do it well.
Exactly.
But where I'm trying to push you to is that once you have a formula where people view you as a balanced source, it would be really great if the more you can expand that and create balance in other arenas. What kind of pushback, if any, do you get where you get a phone call from someone, you got that topic and you didn't accurately represent, or you didn't do the right quote or whatever? How much of that is going on here?
Absolutely. So let me start by saying we get so many emails every week telling us, that we're doing a great job, or how encouraging it is to see a group of people working on this together, specifically a politically diverse group such as ours. But we do receive our angry emails from both liberals and conservatives from time to time. It's funny, our liberal readers think we lean too conservative, and our conservative readers think we lean too liberal. We do get pushback, oh, you missed this op-ed, or you're covering this topic too much. For example, our conservative readers say we cover the Mueller investigation too much. Our liberal readers say we don't cover the climate change issue enough. So the way we look at it, if we're getting the same amount of pushback from both sides, we must be doing a good job. We do get some pushback around false equivalency, about putting, specific outlets next to other outlets that some people view as not as credible. And again, we vet every single article we cite. And so to date, nobody has pointed us to any article we have cited that contained false information. Now, that information may be biased, but that's the whole reason we exist. So when people talk about fake news, they are actually talking about potentially two different things. One is news that's fake, where they say the sky is green. That's just simply false. But then they also talk about fake news in terms of bias. And we actually think bias in and of itself is not inherently a bad thing. I do want to hear what Ezra Klein and Ben Shapiro have to say. I do want to hear their opinion. It's only bad if half the country is only listening to one and the other half is only listening to the other. And so we 100% agree that the articles we cite are very biased, and that's why we're presenting both sides.
And I think I mentioned earlier, that's why I've started calling it skewed news. Because it's not that it's inaccurate, it's just that it's so skewed. I can watch President Trump do a press conference, and then I will the next day see how it's presented in the news. And quite frankly, both sides, from my perspective, usually get it wrong. They're so busy skewing it that, that the skewing in and of itself is an element of misrepresentation. And that's what I found. I didn't used to watch press conferences, but I started watching them specifically because I wanted to see what my takeaway was compared to what theirs was. So now you've built a small but mighty army. Tell me how you assembled your team and how they work together.
Sure. I'm trying to share my screen. Let me know if it works.
Oh, now we got you. There's the flips up. Well, first we had it. There it is.
Excellent. So my team has actually been growing organically. So Jahan, my co-editor, who is amazing, and we talk to each other for hours every day and argue about which topics to choose and which articles to cite. He is a friend of a friend. He lives in Chicago, actually, so all of our work is done on Google Docs and Slack channels. And our team of contributors are coming from my personal network from the campaign, from Jahan's personal network, and also we have our internship posted on internships.com, which you should look us up if you'd be interested in joining our small but mighty team. And it's really fascinating. And it's also funny, one of the first things we ask when we're interviewing someone is, oh, what are your political beliefs? So that's always a nice icebreaker.
Do you have any independents?
We do. We definitely have people who, are fed up with both parties, who are generally trying to figure out if there's a third way. I know that's something that you're very passionate about. So. No,
I'm totally passionate about the fact that both parties don't get it right, and there are a lot of independents out there who want a voice. So I didn't know how you tap that particular voice.
Sure. Right now, we are limited to mostly covering liberal and conservative viewpoints. Sometimes we'll have a libertarian take from, say, Reason Magazine. Other times we'll do something from the center, maybe Bloomberg or some other outlet. Um, because the majority of the conversation is being had still under this binary perspective, we're sticking to that for now. But we look forward to adding a third column someday.
Now, one thing that I'm used to from the news these days is fairly popular, is this notion of, over the weekend, giving people more content.
Right.
Have you given any thought to doing a weekly topic and giving them significantly more content if they want to drill down and really get to the essence of something?
I think as our team continues to grow, that's something to think about. But again, I think our value add is really acting as the first line of defense against all of the news that's always coming out these days. So we want to make sure that we're making it as easy and seamless as possible for our readers. Here is a 5-minute digest, quick quotes from Fox, from National Review, from Vox, from Chicago Tribune, etc., and then you can choose to dig deeper if you want to. I'm not sure that if we start expanding our daily digest, that would go over well with our readers, because we're specifically writing for the person who has limited time and bandwidth.
Now, you talked about
happy to explore all options, really.
You talked about analytics before. How's the growth of the organization been in terms of viewers?
I mean, we've been growing organically via word of mouth and earned media. So I've had a couple op-eds published in the Wall Street Journal. I've appeared on Fox and a few other networks. And so right now we're actually skewing conservative. So we're hoping to make some headway with some liberal networks. There are thousands of people who open us every single day. We have some very avid readers. And whenever, we take a few days off for a holiday, we get emails saying how much they miss us. And so it's all very exciting. We're hoping to run some social media advertisements soon and see what the response rate is there. But to date, it has been word of mouth and earned media, and that's been working for us well so far.
Well, again, I love your product. I think it's crisp, it's clean, it's timely, and I congratulate you on your success today and future success. Tell my viewers again how they can subscribe and get involved, and how they can find you with the .io.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me. It's really nice to be able to talk about the product in a meaningful way. Sometimes I get just 2-minute snippets. You can find us at theflipside.io. And we also have a Twitter account called Know the Flipside, KNOW the Flipside. So you can find us on Twitter. You can find us on our website, theflipside.io. Thank you all so much.
Well, you've been a great guest, and thank you.
Bye.
We hope you enjoyed today's show. As always, our goal is to educate you and to provide solutions. You got a great solution today. If you're tired of this skewed news, this fake news, whatever it is that you call it, and you don't know where to go to get representative information, you're going to go to the Flipside. You're going to sign up. You're going to get the daily emails as I do. Maybe you don't have time to read them every day, but if you go to their website, you can then look up and see all the topics that they've covered, I think literally since the beginning of time, pages and pages of topics. So if you're not caught up on a topic and you want to know what happened with something a month ago, you can still go there. And then, as Anafi said, you can then look at the articles and you can click to where you want to go. And I'm going to encourage you to do what she talked about that her friends are doing. If you're starting on the liberal side to the left of this, click a couple articles on the right. If you're starting on the right, click a couple articles on the left. I'm not trying to suggest you have to flip sides here, but you have to definitely flip thinking. You've got to understand that there are two sides to every argument, and we've got to break the cycle of dysfunction by having people talk to each other. If you don't understand where the other side's coming from, you can't talk to the other side. And if you don't understand where they're coming from and you can't talk to them, you cannot solve problems. That's the dysfunctional part of this. We're not solving problems. Remember, if you're not part of the solution, you are part of the problem. Thank you.